The sound of sirens still makes my skin prickle. That night they painted my kitchen walls red and blue, flashing over the half-empty teacup Savannah had laced with something sweet and heavy. She stood there flawless in her silk robe, crying into the phone. Yes, she's confused. She hit me, she told 911, while I stood 5 feet away, steady as a clock. My name is Beatrice Cartwright. I'm 68, and my own daughter-in-law called the police to have me declared insane. But what they didn't know was that I'd already started recording everything. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from, and hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by family, because this story isn't just about betrayal. It's about what happens when the person they think is too old, too quiet, and too polite finally decides to fight back. Ready then, let me tell you how it all began. Long before that night, the police knocked on my door. When I think about where it truly started, it wasn't that night with the sirens. It was years earlier in the narrow hallways of Maple Hollow High, where the smell of chalk, dust, and floor wax clung to my clothes like perfume. I was the principal then, the woman who could silence a room with a look. Discipline wasn't a word to me, it was oxygen. I used to think that if I kept every rule intact, if I made everything predictable, no one could take advantage of me. Frank used to tease me about that. B, he'd say, hunched over the tiny screws of a grandfather clock in his workshop, time doesn't obey anyone, you just have to learn to move with it. He was a watchmaker, gentle hands, oil under his nails, eyes full of patience. He called me his metronome, steady, unwavering. I called him my pause button. He slowed me down when the world spun too fast. I can still see that workshop, the glow of the small brass lamp, the faint smell of cedar and varnish, the rhythmic tick of pendulums in every corner. Frank believed that time was proof. Never lie about what you did, B. The clock always knows. I didn't realize until much later how right he was. Lucas grew up surrounded by that rhythm, rules from me, patience from Frank. He was a bright boy, good grades, quick laugh, but always chasing shortcuts. The kind who'd study half a chapter and still try to charm his way to an A. Mom, he'd grin, you work too hard. There's always an easier way. Frank would shake his head, and that's how easy becomes expensive. When Frank passed away, a stroke sudden and unfair, the house fell quiet in a way that no sound could fill. The clocks all ticked out of sync for days, as if the heart of the house had stopped beating. I remember standing in the kitchen at 2 a.m., a dish towel still in my hands, staring at the empty chair where he used to sit. The silence was deafening. Lucas came back for the funeral, Savannah at his side. She wore black silk and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, the kind of smile that photographs well but means nothing. She called me Mom before the burial was even over. Too familiar too soon. After the guests left, I caught her in Frank's study, the door half open, her voice low on the phone. Yes, it's big. 4 bedrooms, cedar siding. She's alone now, she whispered. When she turned and saw me, she laughed soft and practiced. Oh, hi, Mom, I was just admiring all these clocks. That was the first time I felt the air shift in my own house. Over the next few months, she came by more often, always with little reasons. Bringing dinner to keep me company, suggesting we remodel to modernize the space. Her perfume lingered long after she left. Sweet, artificial. The scent of control. Lucas, meanwhile, was between jobs or so, he said. He'd come for dinner, always leaving with groceries I'd bought, sometimes a small check I'd write without thinking. Just until next month, he'd promise. It became until next quarter. Then until I'm back on my feet. I remember one particular evening, December, the air thick with snow. I'd spent the whole day preparing Frank's favorite roast, the one I used to make every Christmas Eve. Lucas showed up late, Savannah trailing behind him, wearing a coat that probably cost more than my car. She handed me a small box wrapped in gold paper. For you, she said sweetly. Open it. Inside was a silver bracelet, with a price tag still tucked beneath the velvet. It's from both of us, she added quickly. I smiled, though something about it didn't sit right. Later that night, while washing dishes, I saw my credit card statement pinned to the fridge by a magnet. The same charge, same amount, same store. She'd bought my gift with my own money. I wanted to confront her, but I didn't. I told myself it wasn't worth the fight. That was my first mistake. The second came the day she suggested Lucas, and she move in for a little while. Lucas had just lost another job, and their lease was ending. Just until he finds something stable, she said. We'll help around the house. I should have said no, but the thought of an empty house scared me more than the inconvenience, so I said yes. At first it wasn't terrible. Savannah was all smiles and energy, cooking elaborate meals she posted on Instagram with captions like, "Caring for family is self-care too." I'd see her camera propped on the counter recording herself stirring soup while I actually did the chopping. She'd tag me as my sweet mother-in-law. My friends from the community choir would comment heart emojis. I'd reply with nothing. Then small things started disappearing. My favorite mug, a bottle of perfume Frank had given me, a silver spoon from our wedding set. When I asked about them, Savannah would laugh. "You probably misplaced it, Mom. Happens to everyone at your age." At my age. That phrase cut deeper than I let her see. One morning I found a bank statement on the printer, one I hadn't printed. There were withdrawals at odd hours, 3:12 a.m., 2:46 a.m. amounts that didn't fit any pattern. When I asked Lucas, he rubbed his face and mumbled something about covering bills. But the bills were all in my name. I started keeping a journal, times, dates, notes. Not because I didn't trust them, because I didn't trust myself not to forget. And still, part of me clung to hope. Hope that they were just careless, not cruel. That Savannah's staged perfection came from insecurity, not malice. That my son would wake up and remember who raised him. But the moment that destroyed that illusion came the day of the brand launch party. Savannah had started calling herself a home lifestyle coach. She said she needed a rebranding event to attract sponsors. She showed me a glossy proposal catering venue photographers, $45,000. "Savannah," I said quietly, "that's not a business plan. That's a fantasy." She smiled, slow and sharp. "You could afford it, Bea. Or should I say, Mom, I mean, this house is practically my brand backdrop." I pushed the papers back toward her. "No." Her eyes changed. Just like that, the sweetness vanished. "You'll regret this," she whispered before walking out. I didn't know it then, but that moment, that single word "no," was the trigger that set everything else in motion. That night I sat in Frank's old chair, the tick of his favorite clock echoing through the empty living room. The hands pointed to midnight exactly. Time was still moving, and for the first time so was I. The morning after Savannah's threat, the air in the house felt different too, still like the moment before a thunderstorm. She moved around quietly, humming under her breath as she brewed tea. "Chamomile, Mom," she said, sliding the cup toward me. "You need to relax. You've been so tense lately." Her tone was syrupy sweet, but something in her eyes was watching, calculating. I sipped once just to be polite. The tea tasted off metallic, but I smiled anyway. Old habits die hard. An hour later my eyelids felt heavy, and the clock on the wall seemed to slow. When I woke, it was dark outside and there was a pen in my hand. A document sat on the table in front of me. It was my signature, but I didn't remember signing anything. Savannah appeared from the hallway, her voice light and practiced. "Oh good, you finished the forms. Trevor from the bank said it'll just make paying bills easier." She gathered the papers before I could focus on the title, Temporary Power of Attorney. I wanted to argue, but my mouth felt thick, like my words had been stuffed with cotton. "What did you—" "Oh, Mom," she sighed, brushing a hand over my shoulder. "You've been forgetting things lately. It's okay. We're helping." Helping. That word echoed long after she left the room. The next morning I woke early, 4, 5, 8 a.m., and poured the tea down the sink. It shimmered strangely in the drain, oily, like it carried something that didn't belong in a kitchen. I dumped the rest of the box into the trash. My heart was pounding so hard it made my ribs ache. That was the morning I started recording. I bought a small voice recorder from the hardware store and hid it under the sugar jar. Every time Savannah walked in, I pressed record. At first I told myself it was paranoia. Then 2 days later I caught her on tape whispering to someone on the phone. "She's slipping faster than I thought. The confusion's getting obvious. Yeah, I've got the papers ready, just need the doctor on standby." The doctor. I didn't know who she meant, but I knew I needed help. That's when I called Opal Nguyen, my neighbor from across the street. Opal was the kind of woman who could make even a library seem loud. 71, sharp as glass, with a voice that carried through closed windows. She'd worked in broadcast sound for decades and still spent her evenings editing old tapes for fun. When I told her what was happening, she didn't laugh or pity me. She just said, "Bring me the recorder." We sat in her cluttered den surrounded by reel-to-reel players and blinking meters. She put on her headphones, pressed play, and frowned. Listen to the silence after she hangs up. You hear that click, that's a second line. Someone else is feeding her instructions. My stomach turned. So it's not just Savannah. Opal looked at me over her glasses. No, B. This is organized. You're not the first. She was right. Over the next week, I dug through every paper Savannah had touched. In my files, I found new account numbers I'd never seen before, transfers to a consulting firm called Hale Advisory. When I visited the bank, Trevor Singh, the branch manager, looked startled. Mrs. Cartwright, he stammered, I thought you authorized those. I didn't. He hesitated, lowering his voice. The forms came through your email, digitally signed, from your IP address. That night, I checked my computer's history. Savannah had been using my login. There were emails between her and someone named Victor Hale. I printed everything and locked the papers inside Frank's old filing cabinet, the one with the steel latch. Every sound in the house began to mean something. The fridge hum was a whisper. The creak of the stairs made me flinch. Even the ticking of Frank's clock began to sound like a countdown. Then on a Thursday, Lucas came home looking pale. He sat at the table staring at his hands. Mom, he said finally, Savannah's under a lot of pressure. Maybe if you just let her handle the finances for a bit, things would calm down. I stared at him. My son, the boy who used to bring me wildflowers in a juice glass, was now asking me to hand over my life to a woman who'd been stealing from me. Lucas, I said quietly, do you really believe I'm losing my mind? He looked away. She showed me the papers. The doctor says, What doctor? He swallowed. Dr. Hargrove. I'd never heard the name, but the way Lucas said it, soft, apologetic, made me realize how deep Savannah's web had reached. That night I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat in Frank's chair and stared at the family portrait hanging on the wall, me, Frank, and a 10-year-old Lucas, all wearing matching sweaters. Savannah's reflection shimmered faintly in the glass behind me. The next morning, 2 letters arrived. One was a notice from Golden Horizon Senior Care offering in-home wellness evaluations for elderly clients. The other was a promotional postcard, Protect your assets before it's too late. The logo was identical to the one on Savannah's Hale Advisory forms. It wasn't paranoia. It was a system. I took the letters straight to Opal. She scanned them, muttering under her breath. Golden Horizon's a front. I've seen that name on local news, couple of guardianship fraud rumors last year, but it never stuck. Guess who the spokesperson was? She pulled up a video clip. Dr. Lenora Voss, impeccably dressed, soft-spoken, speaking about eldercare transparency. My goot went cold. Over the next few days, things escalated. Savannah began filming everything, every breakfast, every errand. My followers love seeing our intergenerational home, she'd say. But when I checked the timestamps on one of her videos, it didn't match the day she claimed. Jonah Rourke, a private investigator Opal knew, confirmed it. This footage was staged. The metadata's been altered. She's building a narrative. A narrative where I was the unstable one. The final straw came one gray morning in late October. I found Savannah at the kitchen table with her phone on speaker. Yes, she's declining fast, she said. It might be time for the emergency hold. I stepped into the room. The what? She didn't flinch, just ended the call and smiled. Oh, Mom, you startled me. Don't worry, it's just a wellness check. But her hand trembled slightly as she lifted her cup. That was the moment I realized I'd been living inside a slow-moving trap. Every kindness had been a setup, every smile a rehearsal, every cup of tea a test. I looked at the clock, Frank's clock still ticking faithfully on the mantel. It was 11:47 a.m. And for the first time since he died, I whispered out loud, "You were right, Frank. Time doesn't lie." I picked up my phone, opened the recording app, and pressed record. I think I said quietly to the empty kitchen, "It's time I stopped being polite." The first real crack came on a Tuesday morning, a week after I started recording. Savannah was in the kitchen again, staging another morning with Mom video. She'd positioned her phone against the toaster sunlight spilling across the counter in a way that made everything look warm and inviting. "Say hi to my followers, Mom," she chirped. "They love how youthful you look for 68. I glanced at the camera, forcing a tight smile. "Morning." What the camera didn't capture, because I knew exactly where her frame ended, was the tremor in my hand as I lifted my cup of tea. I hadn't drunk anything she'd made since the night I woke up foggy, but she didn't know that. I just poured it down the sink when she turned away. Later that day, Opal called me over. "You're going to want to hear this," she said, clicking play on her audio editor. She'd analyzed Savannah's 911 call from last week, the one where she'd accidentally dialed emergency services while arguing with Lucas. "Listen here," Opal said, pointing at the waveform. "Pause. Hear that faint 3-2-1 whisper before Savannah starts crying. That's a cue. Someone's feeding her lines in real time. Someone like Victor Hale." Bingo. The realization burned cold in my stomach. Savannah wasn't improvising. She was following a script. That night, I went to bed early, leaving my phone recording from the nightstand. Around 2:00 a.m., I heard footsteps in the hallway, then the soft creak of my door. Savannah's voice whispered, "She's sleeping. Yes, tomorrow's fine. Dr. Hargrove said she's showing classic paranoia. The file's ready." The next morning, I looked her straight in the eye over breakfast. "Who's Dr. Hargrove?" She froze mid-stir. "Excuse me." "You mentioned him last night," I said, calmly, while I was asleep. Her face drained, then hardened. "You're confused again, Bea. Maybe you should write things down before you embarrass yourself." "I already do," I said, tapping my notebook. "Every day." For a second, I saw something flicker behind her eyes. Fear, maybe, but it disappeared as quickly as it came. Later that afternoon, I stopped by Trevor Singh's office at the bank. He looked exhausted, his tie crooked, a bead of sweat glistening on his temple. "Mrs. Cartwright," he whispered, glancing around. "I checked those account transfers. They're being funneled into something called Golden Horizon Fund. I thought it was a retirement account, but..." "But what?" He hesitated. "It's not in your name anymore. It's under Savannah's, marked as Guardian Proxy." Guardian, the word hit me like ice water. I walked home in the freezing air, the town's maple trees shedding the last of their leaves onto the sidewalks. Everything looked normal, kids walking home from school, cars passing lights blinking in shop windows, but I felt like I was standing in a different world, a world where my own son and his wife were quietly erasing me. When I got home, Lucas was waiting in the living room. He looked like he hadn't slept. "Mom, we need to talk," he said. "About what?" "Savannah told me you've been acting strange. Recording conversations, accusing her of things. You scared her last night." "I scared her," I laughed softly. "That's rich." "Mom, she's trying to help." "Lucas, when's the last time you paid a bill here, bought a single bag of groceries? Do you even know how much you owe me?" He flinched. "That's not fair." "No, what's not fair is being gaslit in my own home by the people I love most." He stared at the floor. "You sound paranoid, Mom." That word. That was the dagger. "Paranoid," I said slowly. "Then you won't mind if I call Dr. Horowitz for a real evaluation. A licensed psychiatrist, one who actually exists." He blinked. "Who?" "You'll see." I walked past him, calm, deliberate, just like I did when breaking up fights in the school hallway. I could feel his confusion trailing behind me like fog. That night, I met Jonah Rourke at the diner on Maple Hollow's Main Street. He was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with tired eyes and a kindness he tried to hide behind sarcasm. I handed him Savannah's phone, which she'd left charging in the kitchen. "Can you pull anything from it?" "Metadata, deleted messages, call logs, sure," he said. "But if she's working with a coordinated group, she's using a burner for the real stuff." "Then we find the burner." He smiled faintly. "You remind me of my mother. She once chased a phone scammer down the street with a broom." "She sounds smart," I said. She was. I didn't know it yet, but that meeting at the diner would become the key turning point the night we started building the case that would unravel Savannah's entire illusion. As I left, the wind cut through my coat sharp and dry. The neon open sign flickered behind me, reflecting on the wet asphalt like a warning light. Somewhere in the distance, church bells chimed 8 o'clock. And I remember thinking, let them think I'm paranoid. Paranoia keeps people alive. The next 48 hours were a blur of small, deliberate movements, each one pulling another thread loose from Savannah's web. Jonah called me first thing the next morning. "You were right," he said. I found deleted messages between Savannah and a number linked to Victor Hale. They've been communicating for months. She sent him scanned copies of your bank statement's ID and property deed. My stomach twisted. What about my signature? They're building a false guardianship petition. He even referred to you as a declining subject. That's not family talk. That's business. Business. I'd spent my entire life teaching children how to tell right from wrong, and here I was reduced to a case file in someone's portfolio. I didn't cry. I just asked Jonah to email everything to Aaliyah Morgan, my attorney. She'd handled a few wills for retired teachers I knew, sharp, composed, and with the patience of a surgeon. When I told her what was happening, she didn't blink. B, you're not the first client to face this. Guardian exploitation is real and it's spreading. But the fact you've documented everything that's gold. What do I do now? She leaned forward. You don't fight emotion with emotion. You fight it with timestamps. That line stuck with me. That evening I came home to find Savannah hosting what she called a wellness dinner. 2 strangers sat at my dining table, both dressed in business casual. One of them, a silver-haired man with a doctor's badge clipped to his blazer, smiled at me like we'd met before. Mrs. Cartwright, he said warmly. I'm Dr. Miles Hargrove. We spoke over the phone last week. I don't think we did. Savannah laughed lightly. Mom's been having a little trouble remembering things. Dr. Hargrove just wants to make sure you're doing okay. I looked straight at him. Doctor, where's your office located? He hesitated just long enough. Downtown near the clinic. Which clinic? Savannah's smile tightened. Mom, you're being rude. No, dear, I said, stepping closer, lowering my voice. I'm being precise. For a long second, no one spoke. Then Dr. Hargrove cleared his throat. I think we can continue this assessment another day. Good idea, I said, opening the door for him. He left without shaking my hand. Savannah glared at me the second the door shut. You're sabotaging yourself. Do you even know how bad this looks? Everyone can see you're unraveling. Everyone, I said quietly. Who's everyone, Savannah? The ones feeding you lines during your 911 calls. Her face twitched. You need help. No, you need an alibi. She stormed off, slamming the door hard enough to rattle Frank's clock on the wall. I steadied it, feeling the steady rhythm beneath my fingers. The pendulum swung on calm, consistent. Unlike me, it never flinched. 2 days later, Jonah texted, found the storage unit. You need to see this. We met just outside town at a row of cold metal garages under a flickering security light. Jonah cut the lock with bolt cutters and swung the door open. Inside were rows of labeled boxes, plastic bins, and a filing cabinet. He pulled one open and handed me a file. Inside were guardianship templates, fake psychiatric reports, and lists of names, elderly people across 3 states. And right there in bold type was mine, subject Beatrice Cartwright, target status compliant. Guardian recommendation, Savannah Reed Cartwright. I stared at the paper until the letters blurred. Compliant. Jonah's voice was low. They thought you'd break quietly. The rage that rose in me was cold, not wild like frost spreading on glass. I took a photo of every document, every file name. When I found a burner phone taped under a drawer, I didn't hesitate. I bagged it in a Ziploc and said, we're taking this straight to Aaliyah. By the time I got home, Savannah and Lucas were waiting for me. Lucas looked nervous, his leg bouncing against the floor. Savannah, though, she was composed, too composed. Where were you? She asked softly. Out. With who? An old friend. Why? She tilted her head, studying me like she was trying to read a test she didn't write. Because I'm worried about you. You've been sneaking around meeting strangers. Lucas is scared. I looked at my son, and for a brief, painful second, I saw the boy. He used to be the one who used to bring me coffee after long nights grading papers. Are you scared, Lucas? He hesitated. I just want things to go back to normal. Normal, I said. When you're living off my pension while your wife scripts my breakdown. Savannah's voice sliced in. Enough. You're losing it, Bea. I'll call for help if I have to. Then call, I said, but make sure you look good for the camera this time. She blinked. What? I nodded toward the small red light hidden under the mantel clock. Because I'm recording this too. Her smile faltered just for a moment, but I saw it. The flicker of fear, the realization that I wasn't the compliant old woman she thought I was. I walked past them both, the sound of Frank's clock filling the silence. Tick. Tock. Every second, a record of truth they couldn't rewrite. And deep down, I knew the storm hadn't even started yet. It happened on a Tuesday, the kind of morning that looks calm but hums with electricity beneath the surface. The leaves outside were brittle with frost, and sunlight poured through my kitchen window like interrogation light. Savannah had been quieter than usual, pacing the house, muttering into her phone, glancing at me as if measuring something. By noon, Lucas had left for errands. I didn't believe it. He hadn't had an errand in months. When the door closed, Savannah turned to me, voice smooth as glass. "You know, Bea, I've tried to be patient, but this is getting dangerous. You're unstable, and Lucas can't keep cleaning up after you." "Cleaning up?" I asked. "Is that what you call draining my accounts and forging my signature?" She froze for half a second, just long enough for me to know the shot had landed. Her tone hardened. "I'm calling Dr. Hargrove. This ends today." I set my tea down. "Make sure you look at the camera when you do it." "What camera?" "The one above the clock," I said softly. Her expression shifted, shock then fury. "You're recording me again, that's illegal." "Not in New York. One-party consent." The silence between us stretched tight as a violin string. Then without another word she dialed. 911, she said into the phone, her voice instantly trembling. "My mother-in-law is losing control again. She's threatening us. Please send someone fast. I think she's having a psychotic break." Her performance was flawless down to the little sob at the end. But what she didn't know was that Opal was already on standby across the street, recording everything through her living room mic array. 7 minutes later, red and blue lights flickered through the window. The same pattern as before, 2 officers and a paramedic. But this time there was an addition, a man in a charcoal suit with a stethoscope slung around his neck. Dr. Hargrove. He smiled at me like an actor stepping onto his stage. "Mrs. Cartwright," he said soothingly, "we've met before. I'm here to help." "I don't need your help," I said, calm as stone. "And you're not my doctor." Margaret Savannah began. "It's Beatrice," I corrected cold. "Only people who earn the right can call me by my name." The older officer, same one as last time, shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am, your daughter-in-law says you've been acting erratically. Then she should stop drugging my tea." The younger officer blinked. "Excuse me." I handed him the small vial from my pocket, the one Jonah had tested at the lab last night. "That's Zolpidem, a sedative. The residue matches what's been in my tea for months. I'd advise you to have it analyzed." Savannah's smile cracked. "She's making things up. She's delusional." Dr. Hargrove stepped forward. "Mrs. Cartwright, please let's sit down. I just want to assess your mental state." "Funny," I said, "because, according to the state medical board, you lost your license 2 years ago." His face went white. "That's ridiculous." "Not according to the disciplinary record Aaliyah Morgan submitted this morning to the county court." He looked toward Savannah, who was suddenly pale and silent. The older officer's radio crackled. "Dispatch confirming cross-reference Dr. Miles Hargrove suspended license July 2022 malpractice in elder psychiatric evaluation." That was the moment Savannah panicked. "You don't understand. She's manipulating you all. She's not, well..." But the performance was unraveling. I turned to the officer's voice, steady. "You'll find an external hard drive in my desk drawer. It contains audio from Savannah's 911 rehearsals, phone logs between her and a man named Victor Hale, and video of her instructing my son to keep me isolated. It's already been copied to my attorney." The younger officer lifted his hand to his radio, requesting backup and a warrant check on Victor Hale associated with Golden Horizon Senior Care. Savannah lunged toward the counter, grabbing her phone. "You don't know what you're doing, Bea. You'll destroy your own son." "Maybe," I said quietly, "but at least I'll do it honestly." She ran for the back door, but it slammed open before she reached it. Jonah and Aaliyah stepped inside with 2 sheriff's deputies behind them. Jonah held up his phone. "You're not going anywhere, Savannah. We traced your transfers to Hale's account and the storage unit lease in your cousin's name." Aaliyah dropped a folder on the table. "Court order. Emergency injunction freezing all assets under Beatrice Cartwright's estate, including those moved under fraudulent power of attorney." Savannah backed away, her perfect facade cracking. "You can't do this. You have no proof." I pressed a button on my phone. Her own voice filled the room, tinny but unmistakable. "She's slipping faster than I thought. The confusion's getting obvious. I've got the doctor ready. We just need her to sign the house over first." The silence that followed was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. The older officer finally spoke. "Savannah Reed Cartwright, you're under arrest for attempted fraud and conspiracy to commit elder abuse." She screamed a high, sharp sound that seemed to pierce the house. Lucas burst through the front door just in time to see them cuffing her. "Savannah!" he shouted. "What's going on?" I turned to him, feeling both fury and pity. "You might want to sit down, Lucas. Your wife's been auditioning for a prison sentence." He stared at me, then at her. "Tell me it's not true." Savannah didn't answer. She just glared at me, venomous, like an animal caught in a trap. As they led her out, her voice rang down the hallway. "You think this is over, B? You're too old to win. People will still believe me." I looked at the officers, at the cold light spilling across my floor, and finally, I allowed myself to exhale. Outside, Opal stood on her porch, arms crossed, a recorder still running. Got every word she called out. I nodded, my hands steady again for the first time in months. Inside, Frank's clock ticked once, twice, and then chimed noon. Time, my oldest ally. And for the first time since all this began, it was on my side again. The house was quiet after the sirens faded. Just the faint hum of the refrigerator and the steady tick of Frank's clock on the wall. I stood there for a long time, staring at the space where Savannah had stood hours earlier, her voice dripping venom. Lucas sat slumped on the couch, face buried in his hands. "Mom," he whispered, "I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know she was doing all that." I believed him, but believing didn't erase the damage. "You didn't have to know, Lucas. You just had to look away." He flinched like I'd struck him. "Do you know what hurts the most?" I continued. "Not the money, not the humiliation. It's realizing you let her turn my kindness into a weapon." Tears welled in his eyes. "I'll fix it, Mom. I'll make it right." "No," I said softly. "I'll handle it." Because this wasn't over. Not even close. Aaliyah had stayed after the police left, sorting evidence into neat piles across my kitchen table. "Savannah will face charges, but Victor Hale's still out there," she said, "and Dr. Lenora Voss, the one running Golden Horizon, she's protected by layers of shell corporations. We can't touch her yet." I looked at the manila folder marked Golden Horizon. Photos, contracts, fake medical evaluations. Hundreds of elderly names. My heart clenched. How many people like me? At least 20, we can confirm. Maybe more. They pick widows, retirees, anyone isolated enough to disappear quietly. I stared out the window. The sun was setting, painting the snow outside a bruised pink. The kind of color that looks soft but hides the cold underneath. Then, I guess we don't let them stay hidden. Aaliyah studied me. "What are you thinking?" "I was a principal for 40 years, I said. My job was to keep order. To make sure bullies didn't run the halls. I met her eyes. Now I'm going to make sure they don't run the system." Opal arrived just before dark, her recorder slung over one shoulder. "Got the cleaned up audio," she said, grinning. "Crystal clear. Savannah's confession, Hargrove's fake credentials, Hale's instructions, it's all there. You could teach a class with this." "Maybe I will," I said. That night I sat at my desk under the soft hum of my old desk lamp, writing a letter not to Lucas, not to the police, but to the Department of Justice. I attached copies of the recordings, the storage photos, and a list of the names from Golden Horizon's files. At the bottom I signed my name carefully, my pen steady, Beatrice M. Cartwright. As I sealed the envelope, the wind howled outside, rattling the windows. Somewhere in the distance the church bell struck 6 times. 6 chimes, one for every decade I'd lived. And for the first time I wasn't counting what I'd lost. I was counting down. Because they thought they'd silenced an old woman. But all they'd really done was give her the one thing. She'd spent a lifetime perfecting discipline, patience, and proof. The kind of proof that never fades. The kind that time itself can't erase. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, hit subscribe. Because stories like mine aren't just stories, they're warnings. I was Beatrice Cartwright, the woman my daughter-in-law tried to erase. but I'm still here standing, recording, and making sure every second counts. If you know someone like Savannah, someone who hides cruelty behind a smile, share this video. Let them know we're watching now. Because this story isn't over. Not for me, not for the ones they haven't silenced yet. And as long as Frank's clock keeps ticking, neither am I.